Great. All set.
All right, is there anybody online?
No
Not yet?
online.
Okay. So again, just to set the stage, this is Councilor Corner Live. For those of you who haven't been to one of these before, this is just an opportunity to engage with a couple of counselors on a topic in town. This meeting is focused on the consolidated school. So hopefully everybody has seen information or have attended a meeting. We're here just to kind of answer whatever questions you can, or whatever questions you have. And at the same time, I do have a question for this group that I would like to explore a little bit and get some thoughts going. But before I put that question out, I want to kind of hear from you guys in terms of any questions, concerns, anything at all that you want to kind of ask to start the dialogue. I don't know, Jean Marie. I'm John Anderson. I am one of the town councilors.
I'm Jean Marie Caddigan. I'm sure you guys know who I am. And I came to help out. I don't usually do these, but April had a championship game.
I missed it by 2 minutes.
And then
We
we
still have the game?
Yes,
Oh.
not till 7:15.
Oh, not till
Thank you for
7:15.
that,
Okay.
too.
and we have another town councilor lurking in the back.
Yeah.
I have to slip out at 6:30 for a
Yeah.
presentation.
Yeah.
So that's why I have a quick exit.
Yeah.
But the thing to me that's interesting about this format, because it's changed since the last time I've been to one of these, is there's no presentation per se. So if you were hoping you were gonna get a song and dance on the school, you're not. We're here, hopefully, if you've got questions about, where we're at on the school at all. If you have questions you'd like to have us bring back to school board, would be helpful. I'm a firm believer that if you've got an issue with something, then that's great. You can have an issue with it, you can disagree, but I also like to hear solutions. And, what would you put out there instead? Okay, so I don't like the price of the school, so what would you suggest instead? So, with that being said, that's why I'm here, so.
I'm Sue Hamill, and I've actually made a couple of suggestions to the school board, on alternatives to this building. And one of them would be to build a new school, but have it be just second and third grade. Keep the 3 primaries as kindergarten and first. So you don't need as much land. It's not going to be 1,150 students. It would be about 10. You still move the 3rd grade over. You still can take care of your, move the 6th grade to the existing Wentworth. And you keep the littlest kids in their own neighborhoods. And all those portables could go away because those school populations will be smaller. And they would still need to be renovated, but people are attached to their neighborhood schools. And it is an alternative. And so I mean, there may be reasons, some good reasons why it can't be done. It costs too much when you added it all up, whatever. But I feel that this building committee, they kind of just picked up where the work had been left off. And these decisions go back to at least 2014.
Yeah, 2017 was when the,
Committee stuff.
when the original plans came
But
out.
I mean, I've looked at alternatives, there were alternatives A through J, or, there were a whole bunch of other alternatives. And so I know that there was some creative thinking that was done way back then. But then, somehow we got on this one track, and here we are. And I understand that the building committee at this point, they are working toward a deadline, and we're not here to discuss alternatives. But and I understand that because we only have now like 3 months or whatever. They didn't want to, we don't have time we did that already.
Mhm.
But when did you do that? I never had any input into it. It was done back in 2017.
17.
I mean, the vote was taken in 2020, and it was a 5-2 vote of the then school board. It wasn't unanimous. And that, I mean, I do completely recognize that something needs to be done, that we are, have issues, 34 of us. So
Yeah.
I just would like to see some creative thinking.
Mhm.
And especially given the fact that we're looking right now at a school that's $140 million, the building alone. And then you add all the site work, the road connection, all the road improvements, the utilities, the underground utilities, and dealing with the downs. Is,
It's a daunting task for sure.
and it will be approaching 200,
What's your biggest fear, Sue?
a huge tax increase. And even though, and I have played with the model, and when I do that, and I have written to John, I see a 10.7% tax increase. The difference between not doing it and doing it is a 10.7% tax increase.
Now, I'm curious, now,
And
this is me, okay? You said 140 million. I haven't heard any number per se yet.
well,
I haven't heard a firm number, so
So,
where are you getting
it's-
your number?
Well, at the last building committee meeting, it
Okay.
had, it
It's
was
140.
reduced from
Around
149
140,
to 141.
okay,
And, but that is not including any off-site costs.
right,
That's correct.
that's without the land, right?
And then did site costs. So 137.5 is officially what they put in our budget. And as they're going through final site design and stuff, they're looking at it. And that number will hopefully continue to go down, at least in terms of construction costs and project costs. However, it does exclude offsite costs that are still being defined and identified, and part of that's going to get defined through the option agreement with the Downs, and then the other piece is the land purchase and how much the land is going to cost. So those are still two outstanding cost items that will get added back in towards the end. That will probably, my guess is that it'll probably be closer to like the 150 million once all this is said and done, hopefully, or not exact, but like 150 million plus or minus, additional, $5 million
You
probably.
aren't gonna buy the land to all the road work for $10 million.
The land and the offsite costs would be probably,
Are gonna exceed $10 million.
yeah, and again, I'm assuming that they get the site costs down a little bit closer to
Construction
135.
costs in today's world are going one way.
Mhm.
Well, all costs are. I mean, the
Yeah.
numbers that we looked at in 2017 were a heck of a lot less than what they are now, but that's because every year you delay, it does cost more.
But I'm not worried that they're
Yeah.
gonna be in the realm of like, let's see, you said 200 million. I don't think it's gonna be
So,
close
the
to 200. million.
connection to Sawyer Road,
Mhm.
mhm,
Sawyer Road improvements,
Mhm.
traffic management plan, probably traffic light.
Mhm.
Possibly road widening. I mean, take a ride down Sawyer Road. And you go around. So, and then you're dealing with the downs, and I feel like I see the picture, the schematic, and I see roadway A, roadway B. And currently they are not in existence. And, so how are the utilities gonna get to roadway A? And who is the town paying for that or the downs? And, based on everything I know about the downs so far, probably the town will be paying for it. So. Yeah, I mean,
And just to clarify that when I used the number 200 million, I included what everybody else from the council was talking about in that number of the town center and the library.
Okay,
oh, okay, I was
Thinking
gonna
of that
say,
for-
that's
yeah.
not, but yeah,
Well,
that
but
wasn't,
that's-
yeah.
Yeah.
Those projects have been included in conversation.
Yeah. And I think that's what's being included in the model.
In the model, with John Clucci's model,
Mhm.
Right.
includes those projects.
Can you just articulate a little bit more the 10%?
So,
What you mean by
With,
that?
with Gucci's model, you can take out, you can change it from 137, or I think you might have 140 in there right now. You can change it to 200 million, you can change it to $1. You can take out the library and take out the, which is what I did. I took out the library and I took
Mhm.
out the community center. And then I compared, with not, what were taxes
Mhm.
on, say, the $400,000 house? If we did nothing, no school, no community center, no library. And then compare that to the taxes if we just did just the school. And it's a 10.7% difference.
And has anybody
And
built in the cost savings? Because we've got a cost
Well, no.
associated now with
right,
running the schools. So has anyone run that?
so that,
Yeah.
no, there are no figures yet. I mean, what will happen?
Because we have to build that in too, because that's gonna knock off then on a part, because we are gonna save money. By not having the overhead on those particular buildings. I'm not sure what we'll
Yeah.
decide to do with them as a town. But
Right,
you do. And I have to remind people of that you are gonna have some cost savings there, so you gotta take that off from whatever this 150 million.
Well, I mean, I think it's the difference between, and I think Sue's point is fair of like, there is gonna be like an initial cost.
Yeah.
And that cost will be larger earlier, but hopefully
Yeah.
go down over time, and those additional savings will be realized over time that will help
Yeah.
offset things. But I think that like, it's not lost on either the town or the school. I think that this is a big ask.
Yeah.
And it will have impact, and probably even if we went with a renovate, like your recommendation, I still think it would be a big ask. And so at the end of the day, I think we're faced with a big ask, whether it's something smaller, just because the same thing you said, Richard, like the cost of this stuff is so expensive. Even something smaller, we're probably still talking
Yeah.
close to 100
It's
million,
not
if not.
insignificant ask
Yeah.
by any means.
Oh, yeah.
And so at the end of the day, the other piece that I think is important, and again, I think this is the challenge we have is managing short-term
Mhm.
tax increases with long-term value and potential, because this is a school that we want to build that will hopefully last 50 to 75 years. And so if we go with a solution that's lesser than to try and minimize that tax rate, then there will likely be another solution in 10, 15 years that we'll have to do. So it's trying to balance the finding the right solution that's going to work, one that the community can support comfortably financially, but also one that's going to service the schools for the next 50 plus years, which again, I think is kind of the option in front of us. It's really that long-term, best option, but with that comes a hefty price tag near term that again is going to be near term more expensive, but hopefully longer term payoff in dividends.
Mhm. How long of a bond? I know I'm
I
asking
think it was-
questions that people like, you don't know the answers.
I think
Cheaper, but I'm not on finance.
I don't
so
think it's
I'm
been-
getting
I don't-
answers here.
I don't think in the model, Stu might know, I haven't
Does
looked
this
at the
say
model.
20 years?
no, it's,
30, okay, 30 years,
Yeah.
okay. And how long is the Wentworth bond? Anybody know?
Probably 30 would be my guess.
but when you look at the model, you can see where Wentworth, like even the high school, we're still paying for.
Yeah.
You see these things
Yeah.
drop off, so.
Exactly, well, right, that's what I'm saying, because you're gonna get a drop off
Yeah.
over time. But you're also gonna an increase in the value of the
Mhm.
property, so to
Yeah.
speak. And then you've got the those values you can't put a monetary amount on, which is improved, buildings and learning for the future of the town,
Yeah.
which are the children of the town, as well as buildings that we can use as citizens of the town.
Or not, or sell them,
I sell them.
or
Yeah,
whatever.
that's-
Oh, yeah, no, and I'm not talking about the old buildings, I'm talking about the new one, I'm talking about by building even a new one, you're adding, some value to the town, now it's not taxable value, because we own it. But there's all of those, things you can't, like good school system, that adds value to a town.
John,
Good,
has
just-
anything happened in pursuing an outside independent person to review?
Yep.
Number,
So-
I think this is critical, important, that good numbers reach the public and correct what's gonna happen to taxes, be factual.
Yep. So,
We all know construction costs,
mhm,
I mean, this building, I believe when the bond went out, it was just, we were told it won't exceed $19 million.
mhm.
And I've heard numbers that it ended up 22 or 23 million, so. You know, I don't wanna see, and I don't think I don't think you do, I don't think anybody wants to see. You know, if this model isn't correct,
Mhm,
and the numbers are closer to what Sue has determined,
mhm.
you know. What's the town gonna say? Whoops,
Yeah.
sorry, we
So-
said 2%, but it's
Yeah.
10.
As it relates to the model, we are pursuing two parallel paths to get support. So one, we're engaging the consultant community to see if there's a consultant agency with the right municipal and financial experience who could come in and give a qualified opinion on the validity of the model and the assumptions. So we're looking for them to do that. We haven't gotten the RFPs in to know how much it's gonna cost, but it's probably worth, given the long-term nature of this model, because this model could be something that the town could leverage
Right,
for a long time if it's deemed a good model to help with capital decision-making long-term. We're also trying to engage GP cog as a regional
Okay.
entity to look at the assumptions as well, more like the state and some of the things that they're more experts in. So they're not looking at the accuracy of the calculations in the model. That's what the consultants will help with, but they would kind of, again, just be another party to look at our assumptions to say those seem like reasonable qualified assumptions to be putting into your model. So those are things that we're trying to do. What we're hoping to do by the time we have the workshop with the school board on the 13th, because that's our next workshop with them. The consultants we have engaged because of the week of the 4th of July have all said, don't expect much like that week, but we said, but if you can give us like preliminary, like initial gut reactions of what you see, what you're gonna dig into. That at least gives us some direction for that workshop potentially to know where they're at. And so hopefully we'll have something by that school board
Are you
workshop.
yourself pursuing that, John?
I myself, Tom Hall, and I can't remember if Council Hamel was in that conversation or not. But he and Councilor Clucci, met with a consultant to just kind of show them the model, show them kind of what we're trying to do so that they could produce an RFP and give us a quote of how much it would cost. And I've been the lead coordinating with the GP cog side just to make sure that they're aware that we want to pursue this type of support from them. The one thing I want to get to that you said though too, because you did say cost, but part of what you said, Sue, and this is kind of the question for everyone in the room that I know is a concern, and I was asked today a couple times at the polls was, well, what's going to happen with the other schools if this solution passes?
Right.
And again, we haven't really as a council explored that. Partly because it's still a little early from the perspective of even if this passes, it will be until 2027 until it's available. So this council in theory can't commit future councils, so we can't say we're only using it for this purpose. But I think as a community, we have to align on how can we repurpose those sites to hopefully maintain that community feel that these primary schools give it today. So that's something that I keep hearing people have ideas. They're like, well,
right,
maybe we could turn it into a park, or maybe a community center could be there, or like, I think people generally want to know that,
senior housing.
yeah, it's not gonna become like a industrial complex or something like that. And the reality is our zoning, at least for two of the schools, Blue Point and Pleasant Hill, really limits what we can do. Those are mostly zoned R2, which is mostly residential. So really, if it's not like a recreational use or a municipal use or school use.
We could sell them.
We could sell them, that's an option. Eight Corners is a little bit more dynamic because it's
Right.
in a more industrial zone, so there's a lot more options of what that site could be used for. But I'm just curious, like,
And that can be used for pre-K.
Yeah.
Because that's something the state's been pushing too, that's gonna come down the line, that we
Or-
take into.
or a community center site has
Communities.
come up. So there's a lot of things they could be. But I'm just curious, like, do people have an opinion about what they would like them to be if this passes?
Can I ask
Mhm.
something,
Mhm.
since we're sitting here, I don't know what these people
Yeah.
are. Are you guys comfortable with going around and just saying who you are and why you thought you'd pop in here?
Yeah.
And we got Richard and Sue, so you can, we'll start with Richard, go ahead, just give me your name and,
Richard Hayes, Martin Avenue.
okay,
I'm Sue Hamill and I live down Pine Point. 4
Okay.
kids went through the schools, but I don't have any kids in the schools right now.
Marlene Foudria, and I live in one of those over 55 communities that we have here in Scarborough.
Oh.
that's all right. We like people over 55.
Yeah, well.
And then-
I'm Megan Condrey. I actually live down the street on Trackview Terrace, right on Sawyer Road.
Oh.
So that's why I'm interested.
Oh, okay,
But also I have a 1-year-old at home, so
okay,
he will be starting kindergarten in 2027.
Oh,
So we're
interesting.
doubly interested.
Yeah.
Yeah.
oh, wow.
I guess, yeah, she introduced me.
And Noah, you live where?
Yep, 16 Phillip Street, Sawyer Road, if you
Mhm.
will.
Yeah.
I'm here because.
Sawyer Road,
Yeah, I just don't want the school to be connected to Sawyer Road.
okay,
So,
I'm Kristen Turner. I've been following the project for a long time, but I also live at Pine Point. And I am very curious to see what's gonna.
Yeah.
be building.
and you used to be on the school board.
And the building.
And the building committee. So I'm April Seiler. I'm currently on the town council. I also serve the school board for a term, and Kristen and I overlapped on the building committee. For the record, since we're all sitting here, Kristen and I are actually the 2 dissenting votes from
That's right.
2019.
That's right.
And if I were to vote tonight, on the same project presentation, that, you know, the idea to consolidate, I would 100% vote yes.
Mhm.
So my decision-making from 2019 to 2023 has changed. For what it's worth.
I'm sorry, April, yeah.
Yeah, Tuesday Hernandez,
Hi.
Face Your Way in the Down,
Oh, okay,
why I decided to come to listen.
okay, great.
Hi,
Hi.
Samantha Lang. I also live in the Downs, but I went to Eight Corners. I graduated from high school. I've lived here my whole life, aside from college, and I'm just interested to see how the town continues to build.
I know you, Samantha, now that you say that, I'm like, geez, you've grown up. Sorry. Back row.
Time is everything.
It is.
Thank you for doing that, Jean Marie.
Yeah, no, I mean, because I like to
Yeah.
know who's sitting here in
Yeah.
the audience and what you may want to learn about it or, you know, hear from us.
Is there anyone online that joined?
there is, yep.
Do you mind? For those of you online, if you're there and you want to introduce yourself,
Yeah.
we should be able to hear you.
Maggie, if you'd like to just introduce yourself, you're welcome to.
No, that's okay.
John, is there any information about the land purchase? Is it, Tom Hall at one
So,
time told me that he didn't think the town was even interested in selling us land. Is that done?
Last I heard, both appraisals are due still this Friday,
Mhm.
so we should, in theory, still get those. We don't have anything scheduled yet, but my guess would be next week at some point, we'll flip the papers and see where the 2 appraisals landed. And then have to kind of figure out where we go from there. So that is kind of like a key decision point that we still don't have that information to know, like, if the LOI works as the language was written, that should guide the process, but
Did you send me an LOI?
yeah, the letter of intent. So we signed a letter of intent, and in it, we kind of prescribed how we would try and get to a purchase price based on 2 appraisals. hoping that those appraisals come in pretty close to help get to a fair and reasonable purchase price. That's kind of what we're hoping happens, but again, until we flip the papers, we won't know, but. You know, so we'll have to wait and see probably next week and then kind of decide from there where we go. Yeah. So I thought you were gonna say something. Was it Samantha?
Megan.
Megan, sorry. Samantha's
that's-
behind you.
Yeah.
Potential
Samantha's-
ideas of their buildings, and so I have a 1-year-old at home. We are on numerous daycare and school wait lists.
Oh, yeah.
Have been for many months. Our son is 12 months old. And like the earliest I'm told we could get in anywhere is fall 2024.
Wow.
So I'm at home full time now, and my husband works, but I do my job.
Mhm.
It's a critical need for
It's-
sure.
I mean,
Wow.
we're numerous daycares, we're on many wait lists, some you have to pay to be on, some you don't, like, it's like kind of cutthroat. So I don't know if there could be a public pre-K or even
Yeah.
younger.
Yeah.
Well, the point you're making is really important because we're really thinking about the enrollment from the school. That's gonna be driving up over the next 5 years, and it's really because of those younger children that are coming that aren't in the school system yet, and those younger children are gonna need daycare before they go in the school system.
Yeah.
So again, or as they continue, we're gonna have to figure that out as well. So that's
That's an economic issue too, because
Yeah.
we're lacking workers in,
Mhm.
but yet now we've got all these people with youngsters. I didn't realize that it was that bad.
Mhm.
So thank you for coming
Yeah.
and sharing that. That's like, whoa, that's an eye
And that
opener.
just popped in my head as you asked, what could we use these buildings for? And they're already suited for.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Even if it's not like a public pre-K, we
Right.
could talk Souza expand his programming.
That's a
Yeah.
I
possibility.
mean, everything that I've always heard from Todd is space is premium, right? So space is his biggest limiting factor because he runs his programs at little to no cost to the taxpayers. And he has always been very good about
Right.
knowing how to break even, for lack of a better way of putting it. But I think he absolutely could expand into those spaces. And I'm sure probably would have some pretty exciting program directors who would love to run programming
Yeah.
if they had a bigger space. And we converted the House of Lights
Yeah.
into what is now being used as our community services space. That building was never designed for children.
Yeah.
So, you know, they made good and retrofit that building and it's beautiful and they do amazing programming there. But to your point, these buildings are already designed to have kids. They have playgrounds, they have,
Right.
you know,
You do
kitchens
lunches, yeah,
and, you know,
Interesting.
small bathroom.
small bathrooms.
Yeah, really little. Good for potty training. Any other thoughts, comments? Marlene, what brought you here tonight?
Well, basically, to hear like these costs and look, I have to tell you, I'm scared to death.
Mhm.
I am scared to death.
Mhm.
And we just keep building and building and building in Scarborough and handing out building permits and talking about. And for a school that started out at 130, it's now at least gonna be 150, if not more. And we're all kind of, you have to be realistic on that piece. I'm sorry.
Mhm.
And I'm scared to death, and if somebody says to me, well, your taxes are gonna be frozen. Yeah, okay, that could happen now, or for maybe 2 years, and then all of a sudden they're gonna say, oh gee, we can't afford that anymore. And all of a sudden, it's like we're handed a tax bill that's 3 times more than we're paying now.
Mhm.
That scares the liver out of me.
Are you aware more of what's happening on the?
I
state?
was just gonna say, I was sat in a meeting. That tax freeze, so to
Yeah.
speak, is gonna be no longer.
At all.
But they haven't, they're still up there playing with it, okay? It's gonna be a homestead exemption.
Right.
And it's gonna be income determined, so it's not anymore for everybody, it's gonna be for
Depending on your.
moderate to lower income. I couldn't tell you right off the top of my head what those numbers are, but it is gonna change, there's no more just across the board tax freeze for
That's what we
seniors.
couldn't figure out, why there was not a ceiling on that
Oh, yeah, no kidding.
to
I
begin
mean,
with.
right, that was a poor move by the state, but my concern with that, quite frankly, and I've been pushing with them I'm on the legislative policy committee for Maine Municipal. And they're trying to put us out to dry on it right now, the legislature. Because they don't want to reimburse us for any money that seniors don't have to pay. They're playing games again with the revenue sharing.
So everybody write your legislation.
Yeah, really, tell them, stop this
Yeah.
tax, it's just a tax shift again,
Yeah,
Yeah.
you know, so, but, yeah.
Yeah, I don't need to.
No, and I'm glad you brought it
Yeah,
up.
because I thought that it was set for the first year, is that not the
Yeah.
case
I'm
now?
not sure what's going on.
So I
with
think-
that.
I think
thought it
so
was set
long,
I think
Yeah.
that it's
Yeah.
okay for this.
Yeah, it's this year.
I think until they change the law, and I wouldn't be surprised if when they change the law, they have
Which
to
will be
like,
this week.
they have to think about
Be this week, John.
implications. But they're gonna change it this week,
Mhm.
the new law
Mhm.
for this? I haven't.
Mhm.
Well,
So stay tuned.
yeah, stay tuned.
It's still like,
Yeah.
there's a big battle going on up there over.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that was my biggest reason to get, but your comments were on this. I just have another question, and I don't want to be the devil's advocate there, guys, but what happens if this gets voted down? What if the town says we just cannot afford
Well, that's
this
a good
kind of
question.
money?
That's a
into
real
the
good
school
question.
building? We're back to square one?
Mhm.
I don't think we're back to square one, but what I do think is gonna have to happen immediately is the school's gonna have to start thinking about what to do to prepare for 2027, because any other follow-up item probably will be delayed a year. And really what they're projecting is the enrollment's gonna spike, or not spike, but really start to increase in 2027. So likely, we probably will be in a situation where we may have to find a parking lot to create a modular school like Saco did to be able to house those students. There's no room on the current sites to add additional modulars at this stage. So we'll have to find a place to have something temporary to find space for 100-ish K-2 students that we just don't have today. There might be something on the where they can fill classrooms up a little bit more, but I mean, that's in my mind, if this fails, immediately I would, if I was the school, would be immediately thinking, and myself would be thinking, well, we got to really prepare for 2027 in parallel of identifying the alternative that we want to bring back to taxpayers. We're still, I would say at this point, there's still so many things that need to get ironed out that I don't think there's time to really kind of prior to November, think through that next alternative. But I would say if it does fail, probably immediately after that, the council and the board and everybody's got to get together to say, now what do we do? And how
I
do we?
mean, I just saw what happened with the library.
Mhm.
People just said, you know what, we can't do this, it's not. And I am pro-school, don't get me wrong. I have worked in school systems and I'm not a teacher, but I'm an ed tech. And I did it for years and I know we need the schools, but I am also a firm believer, and I've seen this happen before, that the architects come in with these fantastic plans. Oh my gosh, this is wonderful. Look at this. You got room for this and room for that. And I'm sorry, but to me, a school needs to be classrooms for teachers to work in. Teachers should not be working in closets.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. So instead of having this big open space and these big open huge entryways, build classrooms.
Yeah. I would say if you look at the schematics that are available on the school site, probably 90% of the space is dedicated to classrooms outside of like gyms, cafeterias, those types of things.
Okay.
Like,
And that's my next question.
Mhm.
Okay, you kind of have a number of this number of students that are gonna be going into this building.
Mhm.
Is the cafeteria gonna hold the grade level? Is it gonna hold the number of kids that are gonna be using that space? Because I've seen that before too.
well, that's,
They build these
And that's
big buildings
part
and
of
the
the plan.
cafeterias aren't even big enough.
Yeah.
mhm.
Yeah, and that's definitely been a large part of the discussion at the building level, which learn from past mistakes, right? The middle school was state funded. And so the square footage that we were allowed per student was set by the state. and it was too small before we even moved in.
Right.
Then Wentworth is a different story where we, at the time, the building committee came back to the community and said, we would like to put in a full-size gymnasium as opposed to a elementary school size gymnasium. And the community supported that. And now Wentworth has a full-size gymnasium that's open, you know, and can be rented and is a source of revenue. And so this time around, we're certainly being conscious of, okay, if we're expecting this number of kindergartners, can we do one lunch? And are they all gonna fit? And what is the, you know, configuration for that? And so, you know, the current design has 2 small gyms to accommodate being able to run an appropriately linked program for each grade during the day. As opposed to one big gym.
Mhm.
Does each gym accommodate like a full basketball court so the community can use them?
I don't know if they're regulation size,
Yeah.
that's definitely like a Lisa Solomon question, but they're not. I wanna say no, but I'm not 100% sure that the answer is no.
Yeah, I think they're
don't know how
intended
big
to
they
be.
are.
I don't know what regulation is
Yeah,
for
I
like what
think
it
they're
would qualify,
intended
but
to be elementary school
yeah.
use.
So not community use.
I don't know that they're big enough to have a full-size basketball.
But I mean, for after, or not
I
for
might get
aftercare, but
frantic texts
for,
from Lisa in 10 minutes saying, yes, it is, so
Yeah.
I'll let you know.
well, I think it's more. Like there's use, I don't know if like. Adults would want to maybe play on that court, they probably could, but it would probably be smaller than what we have at Wentworth today, so.
Well, the joke was they would certainly accommodate pickleball on weekends.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the way the building is designed, and this adds a little bit to our square footage, but I think that this is a really smart design. Is the way the building is designed, it's designed to have a community entrance
Yeah,
that is separate from
From the
the
school.
students and the classrooms. And so obviously that adds a little bit to the square footage of the building in order to have access points that are not for the, or that are designated for the public to use when the students are or are not in the building. But the gym, the cafeteria, and the main hallway would all be accessible to the community, but they'd be able to close it off from the classroom space. But that takes square footage to make that accommodation. And it adds to that per pupil square footage number. So when we're trying to scrimp and save, you know, we need to look at really what are some of the decisions that have led to that number being what it is.
Have you guys considered converting those gyms to full-size gyms? So, because if you're considering the community center at the same time, is there, like, that's been the conversation all along, is where's there overlap between those two projects? So can you save a little bit on the community center if you make them full-size gyms?
That's a good question. I think we're to the point now where the ask is so big for the building itself and for the school itself that it feels like that would just be impossible to try and take off, you
Absolutely.
know, and consider a community center that would do the community justice.
Yeah,
Right?
that's my
and of
concern.
course, and I'm the person who's been sitting here going, well, why don't we build a school and the community center at the same time on the same land? So there you go.
Well, it would allow you to plan really
Right,
efficiently.
and that's
For sure.
exactly what I was thinking.
Why are we building another community center when there's supposed to be one going in the Downs?
No, that was that, no, that's just ditch that whole idea right now.
Okay, well, I just.
Just get that right out of your head.
Station would be some-
I don't know if I would say it's completely gone. I think it's silent. I don't know if the Downs residents, if you guys have heard anything more. From,
No, they
Still
wouldn't.
happening.
yeah, to you, it's still happening, is that what you said?
Yes, that is all that we've heard.
Yeah.
As far as we-
So again, I think there's still a potential for something like that, but again, it's not,
Well,
as
that's,
far as I know, there's been no movement on it since.
yeah,
the
well,
public was-
pre-COVID, we did all of that.
Yeah.
You know, there was this so-called private company gonna come in, and gonna do this big center and blah, 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 and it's gonna be really focused on travel teams. To be honest with you, And because I was part of all of that, and it was like, I'll be honest with you, I felt like it was a battle. To get them to do the public piece of it, that they, under the CEA, they're supposed to be. At least doing something, but that's another story too, that I don't wanna go down that alleyway.
That's fine, but I just compare.
Yeah, no, I know.
Absolutely, and you're not,
Right.
and
No.
you're not wrong, there is plan as part of the down CEA, there is language that requires them to go through.
Set
the
aside.
process, set aside land for a community center.
But it doesn't specify how much
How
or
much,
where
what the cost
or
would be and
what
so on.
for or whatever.
But to Kristen's point, and just Marlene, what you said too, it's like, you know, personally, my personal opinion is the school's primary purpose is to serve the children. And so let's make sure it does that first and foremost.
Right,
And then when it comes to the community center, you know, I still feel like we have a lot of work to do to redefine what that is.
yeah,
Because all I know consistently that we've heard is people want an aquatics facility. That's very different from a like community center.
Is that like
Yeah.
a swimming pool?
Yeah, like they want a pool. And
No.
so this could be like the community center could just be, maybe we just do a pool. And we keep the House of Light. Like, I don't know, there's choices to be made.
Right,
So that's why we just started that ad hoc committee again, because. You know, a lot of work went into
right,
that work that Jean Marie referenced back
Right.
pre-COVID. But again, the driver there was partnering with an outside
yeah,
company to kind of help with that. And of course, they wanted to come
they
in.
wanted their thing because
Yeah.
it was their project.
But I think
were-
we need to define what we need as a community, and is it just an aquatics facility and maybe some space for programming? Is it, like, I think there's a way to revisit that and make sure that we build it correctly and right size it, and I actually think the school is gonna, like, it's still gonna be in flight as that committee is up or started, so I think that committee will benefit probably from partnering with the school and the library to better understand what is the programming need and how can we optimize it so we're not duplicating effort with the school and what the
Mhm.
school is going to be able to accommodate. You know, if they can do aftercare there because they have space there, we don't need a community center that can support aftercare.
But is there any window where the school can pivot and say, okay, we want full size gyms? Because I know that gyms are in a very short. supply.
Yeah,
They're like,
I feel like at this point, I don't think that's gonna get,
I don't
It's
think
just
that's
not
gonna,
connected.
Yeah.
that's not gonna, I don't think it's gonna
Because-
fly at the moment.
I think at this point, it's about keeping the costs
Right,
as minimum, and
Do you guys know what the cost of gym is to?
I don't know per square foot. My guess is it would be. Depends on the per square footage. I think that's something we could bring back and ask
Yeah.
and say, if we were to make them, what would that mean? for
so have you
cost?
investigated
Well, I
this? You
know-
have your hand up.
I know, right now, the building, the process that they're going through where they're massing, you know, the spaces. There, it's 193,572 square feet. Right now. And so that works out to 176 square feet per student. Based on 1,100 students. It might be 1,130, so I mean, I could be off. The state standard for elementary schools is 140 square feet per student. So we are already exceeding that quite a bit.
How much did you say? I'm sorry.
It's
I forget.
193,000
I know, but those per student.
per
square
student, it's
foot.
176 square feet per student.
Okay.
The state recommends 140. So when the state is coming to the town to build a school, it's 140, but if the town can show, like, we have 2,000 students that are going to the school, it'll be smaller than 140 square feet per student. If it's just 50 students in the town going to this school, it would be more than 140 square feet per student. Because they still have to have a gym, they still have, so. That is, Wentworth is 210 square feet per student, which far exceeds the state standard.
and I think that the gym conversation is reflected in that number.
Right, but. So how much bigger is that gym than, I mean. Like an extra 800 square feet?
Oh, I think it's quite a lot larger. I mean, the Wentworth gym is two full basketball courts.
Okay.
But what are they, are the ones being planned right now, are they like, I assume they're bigger than them.
They
The
are
two-
they are bigger than the Pleasant Hill gym, what is being planned.
So bigger than the current cafetoriums.
Victorians, yeah.
Museums.
Yeah,
Cafeteria.
But that
That's a
is,
great
you know,
thought.
the number of square feet per student is what really drives the cost.
Yes.
And
But if I could just interject in that state figure, that 140 square feet, that's a minimum. I mean, that's the rock bottom minimum. That's why it's a state. That's what, no, don't give me that one. Because the 140 square foot, the state's not gonna build any, I'm gonna use the favorite Scarborough term, Taj Mahals. I mean, they just aren't gonna do that. The state's not gonna do that. That was what the issue was with the middle school, because the middle school is the only building we've had built by the state. And we were held to those minimum standards, and that school was too small on day one.
well, when the
I'm
state,
just gonna
when
say
the
that.
state comes and builds a school, if the town wants an extra large gym,
Right.
then they can have an extra large gym.
And we paid
And
for it.
we pay the extra cost,
That's
and that is what Saco is doing. They're
That's
paying
right.
part of there, and it's very common for a town
That's
to
correct.
pay a portion because they want to add whatever.
But my point is throwing around this, square foot per student
Well,
is,
I think the one piece that I've asked to better understand, because I think it is unique for Scarborough around our programming, is our special services, because those spaces. In some ways, a single child may be mandated to have a specific space in the school.
right, it's great.
And so Scarborough has become, and I'm proud of this, a very good, well-known community for serving special education needs.
Yep.
And so, again, I think you also have to look at the programming. And I think I would presume special education probably has a higher square foot per student,
Yes.
just because you don't always have the same number of students per classroom. And so I
Plus you
think,
have ed techs affiliated and
Mhm.
associated with special ed.
I do
Sometimes
wonder-
there's more than one per student.
Yeah, the state standards, I wonder when they've been most recently. updated.
Yeah, that was gonna be my other.
The way
So
special services are.
I actually
now.
called Scott Brown, who's the state director, to find out.
Mhm.
Because I had heard, at least at one of the building committee meetings, the number, it was 140 to 210 is what the building committee said. And I'm looking at the material on the state website, and it's showing 140, like it is 140. And so I called him to find out.
Mhm.
And he absolutely said it's 140, and he was the one who said, so if it's a really big, if it's a big population, it might be less than 140 square feet. And so he confirmed that that's the current standard, and that's what we go with.
yeah, I think one of the things that they shared at the last building committee that's also probably worth noting was that when they're looking at classroom sizes per student, I think they were assuming the median recommendation versus the higher or lower end.
Mhm.
And so that partially probably is, I don't want to say inflating the number of classrooms, but it's definitely factoring into how many classrooms you need for the population we're assuming.
Mhm.
But what they did also share was partly by doing that, it gives them flexibility that if those numbers are off where it's not 1130 and say in 20, 30 years, we're up to 1230, this school should be able to accommodate it. And that would drive down the square foot per student, because now you're talking an additional 100 students that they're building capacity for, even
Right.
though it's more about trying to be in line with best practice from classroom size so that we could, 30, 40 years from now, still have that same footprint and not need to do an expansion. The other thing that they do have, there's enough room on the site where there's, I think, 24 classrooms that they could add in the future. So again, this is like trying to be that long-term 50+ year solution, not just the solution we need right now and based on what we know right now. And so I think that's, to me, like part of the challenge of figuring out like what is right sizing it, because a lot of this is dealing in the future, and we're trying to make good, smart choices that not only are reasonable, but also trying to make sure that this isn't outdated like the middle school the day it opens, because then we're just gonna have to have the same conversation in 10 years
Right,
and or adding modulars everywhere to try and make things work.
right. And
I see you guys whispering back there, so there's something you want to share? Sorry, this is, we do this private method here. Yeah, yeah. Sorry, not to call you out. Oh, I'm sorry, no. Yeah.
Just because I'm not familiar with the Scarborough schools. For clear, because I've been in Maine for about a year. So I'm still trying to get familiar with how the school systems work. And
Yep.
kind of the schools that we have here in Scarborough.
So we have, I can give us start and then you guys can chime in. So right now we have 3 K-2 primary schools located in different parts of the community. So we have one relatively close here, and then there's one down by Pine Point, and then there's one in Pleasant Hill in that neighborhood. Then we have an intermediate school that's 3 through 5, and then we have a 6 through 8 junior high, and then 9 through 12 high school. The junior high, as we keep referring to, that was built 20-ish years, less than 20 years ago.
more, yeah.
And originally it was built again with a much smaller school footprint in mind. So almost immediately we had to put all of 6th grade in a separate modular part of school. I don't know if that's where Samantha, if you were in the modulars when you were in. Okay.
Yeah.
They called it.
Mhm.
Right.
So,
So right now, our entire 6th grade, both people in portables that sit adjacent to the main building.
Yeah.
So they get all their classroom time out there, but if they need to go to the gym, the cafeteria, or to receive band, art, all their specials, they leave the portables and walk.
and unfortunately, like when we talked about, could we expand the middle school and add 6th grade? Part of the problem is the cafeterias, the library, all of the shared spaces, again, weren't built to accommodate this class size. So we would have to rebuild all of those. And what we learned was, unfortunately, where they built some of those shared spaces, the utilities run through there.
Yeah.
So it'd be an added cost to move the utilities and do all that work. So,
Plus you have wetlands.
Yeah. so that's why in this solution, what we're talking about is moving the 6th grade down to the current intermediate school, which is 3 through 5, make that 5 through 6,
4 through 6.
4 through 6, sorry, and then move the 3rd grade that's there into with the K-2 students. So we would have K through 3 together in one larger consolidated school. No?
Personally, I was in middle school during the housing crash, and back then it was all the Indian wings. So that was actually Passamaquoddy. It was not
Yes.
6th grade. Just so you know.
I remember.
Yeah.
That.
Yeah, but anyway, I just wanted to make the connection. I told you this, John, but it used to be the population back in the 2000s was like 17,000 people, maybe year 2000. And the schools definitely had issues, but it was nothing like this. And this school is just a growth issue. It is nothing else.
Yeah.
The schools are not the problem.
Mhm.
It is the growth. And I know the town doesn't want to hear it, but the voters are going to agree with you.
Mhm.
I guess, and you know, I've got other subjects, maybe I could say it in Republic.
Mhm.
And I'm sure that I will, but
Yeah.
Really?
I think that we're gonna notice people starting to say, well, geez, I bet Crossroads really wants the school passed because they're sick of everyone saying,
Mhm.
what's going on with the schools? And maybe that's why the voters are also gonna be a little bit apprehensive. I mean, we've talked a little politics about this too, and politically, it's tight at best, if I predict what happens.
So I know growth definitely has contributed to the problem. But when I look at the growth, especially the surge that we experienced, our enrollment didn't surge along with it. So I don't think the problem we have today is due to growth. I think we've always had a problem that our schools were under resourced, and thankfully we've had teachers and administrators who have worked hard to make it work, to band-aid and duct tape it. And frankly, this is a solution that should have been brought forward well over a decade ago but because of other priorities or things or COVID and all this other stuff, you know, it didn't. And now, but now's the point in time, at least for me personally, I don't want to be that other excuse that's kicking the can to the next council or to the next group of people to make the tough decision, because right now had we done this 10 years ago, because we still probably
Yeah.
would have needed the same solution, we'd probably be talking about half the costs. And a lot of that is because of COVID. And so, again, this is what happens when you don't act. When you don't act, things get more expensive, they get more challenging. Growth, I'm not saying growth is not part of the situation, but I don't think it's the biggest contributor. I think the issue was here well before the growth, and the issue will be here very soon with the incoming kindergarten class that we're expecting to be. We know for a fact will be 100 more students than what we have today, and we don't have capacity for it. We don't have the place to put those 100 students in 2027.
So where'd they come from?
Well, a lot of it, what we're seeing is birth rates. So birth rates in Scarborough are growing up. I could say my theory personally, I don't have data to support it, but
Sure,
my theory is because we're an aging population, you have a lot of people downsizing. A lot of the growth in students, when we looked at the data from families, wasn't from new development. It was actually coming from people moving into like Pleasant Hill, because people are leaving Pleasant Hill and then new families are coming in. And so that in and out migration within the community, as we have an aging population who's looking to downsize, I don't know where they're going. I don't know if they're going to the Downs or if they're going to Florida. But the reality is, it's really the more recent growth in the schools has been coming from not new development, but houses that have been around for,
Large houses.
yeah. Yeah.
And I mean, I love smacking the Downs every time.
Yeah.
But, I mean, we've got Holbrook Farm Road, perfect example. We've got New Jasper, right?
My neighborhood's a big one. Like,
That
we
is
have like
not- I was
gonna say,
yeah, we
yeah.
have a lot of kids.
Sure,
That's
I mean,
not insignificant.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's, those are $800,000 houses. We got, I think, successful New Yorkers coming in.
Mhm.
That's not a problem, but they have kids and like a 4-bedroom house, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So we still have a lot of single family coming in. I still count that. It's, I wasn't implying it's only.
Yeah. Well, I do think we have, at least in our latest GMO that we approved, the GMOs are growth management ordinance. It basically sets the pace for residential development. And through like some policy decisions, we're trying to limit single family and 3 bedrooms, because those tend to be the biggest contributors to school age children. So in the current GMO, we did try and manage that a little bit tighter. That will hopefully help. But like, as we talked about, to me, if we don't get a school solution passed, the council, when the school has to talk about, well, what's our solution for 2027, I think the council has to say, do we need to put a moratorium on single family and 3-bedroom units to make sure that we have a plan to absorb that we're not adding insult to injury without a solution in place. That's probably not a popular thing, but I think it's a real.
I mean,
It might be very popular.
I think it-
and I know, so
I
Yeah,
think,
you gotta be careful with
Yeah.
that stuff.
out of respect for you, because you're pro school, I assume, right?
Trying
I'm gonna say, maybe you don't want to use that one because you're basically saying, kill the school, moratorium.
well, I don't think we don't want that
You
to
know what I
happen
mean?
either, because
I'm not saying
Yeah.
you know the message.
the other piece though is like how we pay for this school, to
Yeah.
Sue's point,
Hmm.
to keep the costs lower. And it's not the full story, but it's partially through growth. Like,
Yeah.
the more we grow responsibly, that new tax valuation that we're getting is gonna help. And as we explore whether we can leverage TIP funds for this or not, that's gonna have some additional cost avoidance to taxpayers. Where through the area where the Downs is, it's called a tax increment financing district. So there's some tax shielding we get from the state for the growth that happens there, and any of that avoidance we pay, or we avoid for state or county taxes, we get to reinvest in ourselves. And so whatever that increment is, of the tax increment financing is what we can then, essentially have as like net revenue that we can apply to investments within the TIF district, and so that will help, apply that potentially to school and decrease the amount of money for taxpayers.
So you can pay part of the school debt service with the TIF.
There's some rules by the state that it has to be leased, so there's like some things that we're still exploring with the state to make sure that we can.
There's always something.
There's always something there.
So that is something, I don't think it's in the model, the TIF piece.
It is, actually it
Is
is.
it?
But he runs it, you can look at it both ways, with or without.
Okay,
But it's actually a 40%, he adjusted from 100% to 40%.
yeah,
It's not how you pay for the school debt.
he did I think because now we've had more time on TIF.
Yeah.
He was able to update the assumptions better to make them more accurate, so I don't know, like before we've talked about. And this was like more theoretical, that for every dollar shielded, we gain like 58% cents or something, or we save
Right.
58 cents to the dollar. But that was like a, very like theoretical model that was accurate at the time, but now we have real data that we can say, well, what are the real TIF benefits? What are we really saving to apply better estimates? But we are hoping by the time we go to bond, by the time this gets to the council on the 16th, we can explain all of this. But I think the TIF piece is a little complicated for the average person. I think they really just want to know, Sue's
What's
point,
the
like,
tax?
what's my impact next year? Like, that's really the question.
Right,
And even kind of as we start to say, but in 30 years, like, I think that's for some people,
they don't care.
it's a stretch too far. We're gonna do the work and we're gonna help explain that, but. At the end of the day, I think what people mostly want to know from a tax perspective is year one, what's gonna happen to my pocketbook?
Right, but it's not gonna be a year, so that's
Yeah.
one of the issues about the way it's gonna be financed is that we only take 47 million the first year. So, and we don't pay anything on that, and it won't hit your taxes till the second year.
Right.
Then the second year, you take another 47 million, the
Yeah.
third year, another 47 million.
Mhm.
And so that it's not gonna be like all at once, you get a 10% increase,
Right.
it's gonna be gradual. But if you were to look at what is the full impact, say 7 years from now, you will know.
Yeah.
And it is a 10.7%.
Well, that's where I thought but this might be how you're defining the 10.7, because I know from what I understand, like our debt, well, that debt is building, other debt is declining, and things are happening with Haggis Parkway that help us. And so we are in theory, like, to your point, like, wouldn't it be nice to say in 7 years, we could reduce the mill rate because we no longer have that debt. But the reality is we still are gonna have investments as a community that we're gonna need to make. So there will be something. If
So-
it's not the school, it's gonna.
Well, let me throw this out here, because I sit here and that's why I'm a big person.
I miss finance.
You're the finance guy, but that's okay. So I've lived in Scarborough since 1987. My daughter graduated from Scarborough High School in 2009. So she was in the Scarborough schools from 1996, which is about when the middle school came online, if I remember, 96 or 98, it was somewhere in there.
Somewhere right around.
Yeah, it was
I
somewhere.
missed it, but
Oh, okay, that's right. So you were in the school system then. And back then, we were talking about the schools. And how we needed to improve the schools, and there were issues with the schools, and that hasn't changed.
Mhm.
And is his name Todd
Jepson. Yeah.
Jepson? Thank you. He's done a damn good job
Yes.
keeping the Band-Aids on the place. So I'm looking at this with a big picture thing. Bottom line is, we need to do something. I'm like April, and I guess you were the same way. You were voting no a long time, because I'm a teacher. For those of you who don't know, I used to teach. I taught middle school and I taught high school. And it's important, what you have, where you teach and what sort of surroundings you teach in, and where kids are hanging out all day, so to speak. So the quality of schools is important, and there are health issues and whatever around that. So it's like, so when do we bite the bullet and do something? Because we need to build something. In my opinion. I was not wild about the big school because I was like, oh my God, you got all these little kids in this big school and blah, blah, blah. But I've been sold on the fact that it does make sense. Both from an educational point of view, because the way they're gonna design this in such a way that it's like little villages within the schools. Kind of like the old middle school that you remember, you had Passamaquoddy here and you had whoever there and whatever you were, I mean, wherever you were. My daughter was part of that too, and it was multi-age at the time. In other words, it wasn't just all the ninth graders were here and all the whatever were there, which I think developmentally is really good for kids, but that's another subject. But I've come around to the fact that it makes sense to build this school and the concept around it. It makes perfect sense to me, and plus with busing issues and all the other extraneous things. So that being said, so as a town, number one, is that what we want to do? That's the big decision. And it's like, if not now, then when? Because the longer you wait, the more it costs. And the more money you're putting into the Band-Aid solutions, into the schools that have been going on for years, other than the Wentworth School. Because I remember when Wentworth, oh my God, that place, they finally were forced to build Wentworth because of the issues there. So it's like, I'd hate to see us get to that point with these 3 other schools. So why don't we bite the bullet, build the school? Now, there may be places where we can save money. Where are we building too much? Do we need to cut back a little? What can we do? But, and maybe I'll tell you right now, I'm not totally convinced this is ready for prime time. I've been saying that for a while. But it's not ready to go out there in November. Maybe it is, but I don't,
Yeah.
But that being said, we have to do something. Something has to happen, and it has to happen sooner rather than later. So if not now, when? That's my big political speech on the school. Thank you.
Good one.
Well,
I'll let you go first.
I'm not convinced that the one big school is the ultimate, that's what we would turn to eventually. I'm not sure that there are any research results that say you get better learning happens in one consolidated school. The city of Portland made a deliberate decision to renovate 4 of their elementary schools. And they are the same vintage as our 3 elementary schools. And they did it over a 5-year period. And the reason that they did it is that they wanted their kids to have a strong connection to their own community. And I know that there are a lot of people who moved to Scarborough because we have a small elementary school model. And the citizens of the town have never had an opportunity really to vote on, well, did we just give that up and go to one big consolidated school? And the city of Portland does not have special ed programs or like for kids who have the greatest need. They go to one school. They get bused. So it's.
and you should hear the parents about that.
Well, I mean, this is where I think we have to, yes.
Say, can you say more?
I work in the city of Portland. I go to schools a lot. I am in there with the students. And the difference between socioeconomic levels, between resources is vast. It is not a great system. And I think that's also why South Portland is building a unified like middle school. That's why they have a community school model. It's because Mahoney and Memorial had such different socioeconomic levels. The kids were not taught at the same level. They didn't have the same resources. And it's important to have a unified school to the extent that children would have the same resources. They would get the same chances.
Yeah.
So I think that's why unified schools are.
So I think I agree, yeah. And the other point about community though, like I feel like my perspective as a parent who came to this community with young kids was before they were in the school, we did community services. And I felt like that helped create community. We met friends that didn't go to their school. That helped create our community. When my children went to Eight Corners and their friends went to Blue Point, we lost touch and we didn't see them as much. So I actually feel, at least how I've come to define what makes community, is it's less about the neighborhoods where the schools are, but more like the interactions we have. Like technically, Sue, if you and I were in school at the same time, you'd be probably at Pine Point, I'd be at Eight Corners, and we probably would never see each other, get to know each other until middle school. But I've learned so much from you that, like, I would hate to say, well, because that's Pine Point, you know, I'm not going to benefit from Sue Hamill and her family. And so again, like I feel like, to me, when I think of community, I guess it depends on how you think of community. I know a lot of people who have been in Scarborough a long time have more of like a neighborhood view of, you have Pine Point, you have Pickens Beach, you have this area. I guess for me, when I think of Scarborough, I think of everyone and every neighborhood. And to me, that's our community. And putting all the kids together just kind of reinforces that that's our community. But that's what I value. But I totally understand that there are people who value the notion of like something very tiny that you can walk to. Partially because my kids go to Eight Corners. There's no way we're walking down Gorham Road to take those Eight Corners. So I'm not getting the benefit of a community. So when we talk about the community, we're really talking about Pine Point and Blue Point, not Eight Corners. And so that's where I totally understand people who live there. I know you're at Blue Point. You probably loved walking your kids there.
Sadly, we didn't walk. My kids were so excited to get on the bus.
Yeah, so you can't even walk. You didn't get the benefit. Yeah, but I will say that again, within the school, as Jean Marie noted, they're trying really hard in the design, and I don't know how this impacts the square footage, but really making sure that they're designing for communities within the school.
Right.
So that way the kiddos still get that community sense, and the way that they're designing the spaces, they're trying to make communities within there, and they're also designing it with 2 levels to try and keep the younger kiddos together from the older kiddos, because I know that's one of
Plus
the
this
concerns.
big wall
Yeah, and you can't have
around that, you can't have certain ages above the first floor.
Yeah, so they're trying really hard to design this in a smart way that really takes the children's needs in mind, to the point where in the business case and things, they've looked at the distance it takes from the furthest point to the closest point in each of the existing primary schools, and have tried to design the school to keep it to that same distance so that the little legs can not have to walk that super long distance. So they're really trying hard to make sure that for the youngest ones that are there, that they feel like they're in that community. And the one thing that I think creates the community more than anything are the teachers and the staff. Like when I think of Eight Corners, I immediately think of Mrs. Kirsch, who greets us at the door. And I totally expect she's going to be at whatever happens with the schools, wherever that is, greeting kids at the door by name and like saying the same thing. And to me, that's community, not a location. It's that feeling that we create within, you know, the people that we get to know and get to spend time with. Yep.
Okay.
Sorry.
Yeah.
I don't want to call you Samantha again.
Megan, right?
Megan.
I have a 1-year-old, so I support the unified school project. I love the point of being an equity issue. Our closest friends are in Pleasant Hill. They have a 1.5-year-old. Our sons would be in school together, but they wouldn't attend elementary school together as it stands now, and they're each other's only friends as one. So I love the idea that they would go to school together in a brand new school, such an opportunity. But I live right off Sawyer Road. So the main question is, and I love the idea of school potentially like literally being in our backyard.
Right.
Fabulous for us. What would the entry point be for Sawyer Road? Like my street is private, it's a dead end. Very intentionally. And what's happening with Sawgrass? I went on a walk today and it looks like that's connecting to the downs.
So I think Sawgrass, the way those roads are, they're so small that I don't think they're built for buses. What we are contemplating, and it's in the signed LOI that we recently just signed, is exploring Trackview Terrace as the potential connection point. But again, I think there's still more work to be done, because there's a lot of work that would have to happen to make Trackview Terrace, as you know, because you live there, it's still kind of a dirt road, and
Oh, yeah.
so there would be a lot of work to be done to make that happen.
Are there any other potential entry points?
The committee did kind of look at different options, and so again, I don't think there's a committed option, but we need to figure that out over the next couple of weeks.
Sure,
And-
right up by Costco.
Yeah,
That would be the school access point, or anyone could then enter the downs that way.
I don't think I don't think we could limit who goes through there. So again,
But they don't, way I understand it, and correct me if I'm wrong, is they don't want people using that as a cut through to the downs.
Sure.
I mean,
Yeah.
no,
But there are ways to engineer the road so
Yeah.
that it's less
Let the feel.
fun to cut through that way. Or there are different ways to do it. Well, that's.
so
what I
yeah, the
understand.
main focus, the main entry points, I think that are kind of pointed out in the current schematics that are public is there'll be like a main pathway coming up through an already planned road that comes from Payne Road, I think. And then there needs to be a connection to Sawyer that will allow for another entry point. So that way people coming from like Pine Point will probably use that, but people coming from, you know, West Scarborough that can take the Payne Way will come up that major roadway there.
What would that process look like? I mean, it's a private road. I can tell you, like, we own the beginning of the road because
Yeah.
when the house sold last year, we had to sign papers to even give that
Mhm.
back.
The association, and is there an
There
association?
is no road association,
Okay.
actually, yeah.
So I would think
Who
that,
maintains the road? You don't mind?
My neighbor, he's
Yeah.
got like a big John Deere and he,
so I would think
That's it.
when and if that happens, I would think that the town would contact the property owners along whichever is the place.
Track view. Isn't
Track
that the
view.
guy- Doesn't Downs own the easement there?
I think so.
it's, yeah, it's interesting. If you go on like the town, what is it called, GIS?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It looks like they own it, but I know we own it,
Mhm.
so.
So I think
don't
those
know where
are,
that.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
interesting. Anyway.
Yeah. so I think that's where there's still a lot of
Yeah,
things to explore there.
And so they already tried to connect the downs to Sawyer Road via track,
Oh, okay.
via a rezone. And that got shut down, set there. But this is already something they're trying to do, it's their agenda to do it. So they'll use the school as an excuse. Yes, it is.
now, Noah.
Yes.
Come on.
I mean, yeah, I think,
This was before the school.
yeah. The school is definitely has been throughout the process requesting that if it is in the downs, there needs to be a northern exposure to be able to get in, and they would
You need
prefer,
You need
like
to-
frankly, when the site was getting selected, before we even approached the downs, the general location that was eventually landed on happened to be the suggestion of the school committee through the executive session work that was done, because again, everybody was thinking, you don't want it to be like in the middle of everything. And really, there weren't very many places within their current property that could have accommodated it. And so that really was the best location, and it also had to do with its proximity to the rest of the
campus.
campus. So it really will feel more like an extension of that campus, given its proximity. And so it really, while I know it historically, the Downs has wanted to have an access point, I think the school actually is going to require it in order to be able to get students in and out pretty quickly and not
It's not
having to travel through all of the roads that are there. Yeah,
So how do you differentiate? I think someone asked, like, it's a pretty prime shortcut for anybody that wants to zip from 114 and do 50 to the downs.
well, for the most of the way that they're
I
building,
mean, you can.
Yeah, the straightaway on Sawyer Road, like right off Route 1, I mean, people speed,
You
like.
can boogie.
Oh, I know, I cut through there all the time. I don't go 50 though.
Mhm.
I know. That's
Or
what
speed
I'm-
bumps in.
Yeah.
we guys have
Speed bump,
real
stop sign and
10 speed
every
bumps, right?
intersection.
Well, yeah, we've got makeshift sewer
Yeah.
lines.
Yeah.
You got the ducks. I always have to stop at the ducks that cross over by Tracty Terrace there.
Can you guys maybe consider having meetings with some of the neighborhoods most impacted by this whole project? Like, I
Oh,
think
we
it would
will.
be nice for
Yeah, we
Pine
will.
Point to have like just a really good discussion about what's going to happen to Blue Point should this pass.
Mhm.
Or what's going to happen to all the people who live on Sawyer Road.
And I think what's important for people to understand is like what the plan is, especially those that are gonna be closest to the school.
Yeah.
To know what, because what's gonna come with the school is called a traffic movement permit, where essentially the state's gonna dictate to us. In order to accommodate the traffic, what are the projects or things we need to do to make sure that the traffic flow and everything can continue. So I'm assuming, say Sawyer Road is an access point on where Gorham and Sawyer Road meet. That probably needs a light.
Oh,
And again, that probably needed
that's
a light
horrible.
before
That's horrible.
any of this.
Down.
And so, again, I think this is really probably for the residents that live along Sawyer, gonna hopefully make a lot of traffic improvements that are desperately needed there, and this just is gonna like bump those up the list. But a lot of those improvements are things that likely need to happen at some point. This is just gonna prioritize those to happen probably sooner rather than later and we'll probably be forced to do it by the state, where they're say you need certain enhancements with sidewalks and
And
traffic
it
lights.
is, and it's, and I'll be the first one to tell you, it's gonna be very hard for folks who are off from Sawyer or have lived on Sawyer forever, because Sawyer's always been more like a rural, almost type road, but because of how it's located, it's only a matter of time before it became what it's becoming.
When will be, like, the estimates on the costs, like the TMP, that won't be done for it, I mean, it could take a long time, and then the cost estimates for the road improvements. So when we are voting in November on the school,
Mhm.
we are only gonna have some information, like the actual cost of the school. But is the town gonna come forward with a good educated guess on what the traffic improvements are gonna
I
cost?
would
Yep.
hope so.
Yeah, we'll probably come forward, we will definitely come forward with off-site improvements that we're projecting are required. Again, the school actually, I think, is having their preliminary TMP conversation with the state. And again, I don't know the timeline it'll take, but to your point, the intent would be, and we would have to figure out how to factor this into the referendum. Do we include those as one total cost, or how we package it? Maybe we say, this is the cost for the school. This is the offsite improvements that include these types of improvements, so that people know what's in there, or it could be a separate question altogether, because technically for like what we could do in our budget, if more things come out that through the state eventually, those are things that we could put into our CIP.
Right.
We don't have to go to referendum.
Don't have to, but I think people would wanna know.
I think so too. I think we need to tell them the total cost of what's likely gonna happen, so that they're making an informed decision of not just for the construction, but any offsite improvements that need to be done as a result of the traffic and. what
And
needs to be.
I would hope that our attorney would read through that section of the charter where, what do we need to vote on versus what do we, we don't vote on road improvements.
Right.
So how do you define that?
Yeah, I've seen the preliminary work from the school. And it's still in flux, and I'm sure. Part of me wonders if it will come forward at their 7/13 workshop, that they'll be able to start to share that more. But again, I think as Megan mentioned, like, we do probably as a town need to do some outreach to residents.
Yeah.
That are gonna be impacted before, like, I think that's the timing part, is make sure we have conversations with them before we go out publicly, so that they're aware of what the town is thinking, to make sure that we give them that courtesy before we just start saying, here's the plan.
So as far as the design goes, I know I've been very critical of Payne Road TMP design. And problem that I see is, I think the order would be this has to pass the referendum, school does. Then it triggers the TMP review by adding more than 99 cars at peak hour. That's the way it was explained to me. And then the problem is, after that, you don't know what the design is gonna be. Right, so if we get something cute, like an alternate merge, I don't think people are gonna take that route.
No, I
They'll
don't,
already. vote
yeah.
on it.
I don't think anything like that. Like, again, most of this, in my opinion, and I'm not an expert in traffic, is gonna be like
We
lights
should go to
and,
transportation. committee.
yeah, yeah. It's gonna be like lights.
Yeah.
And turning lanes. And sidewalks, I think,
Yeah.
in this
Would they
particular
have
area.
like prelim of that?
I think they will.
I mean, I don't know if you can vote on that, but
I think they will, and I think it will be stuff that will be publicly out there and available, and again, depending on how we structure the bond. It could be something that we say, this is inclusive of those things. And trying to commit to the community, right, especially those that are impacted, that these are projects we're gonna take on as part of this. Project, so that there's a little bit more confidence that we're gonna do what we said we're gonna do. But again, if things get more expensive, or if there's other things that come up that the state may require. Because part of me, like, while we're thinking of offsite, we're thinking mostly within the vicinity. You know, we haven't really talked about, well, what's the impact now coming from Pleasant Hill? And are there any traffic improvements on Pleasant Hill that may need to be accommodated, knowing that now you're gonna be having people coming from there or from Blue Point? And again, technically, I think. It may not be that big of an issue, because we're kind of already doing that today from a transportation perspective, where. You know, at least third through. Like, from third grade up, it's all central, and so if somebody's dropping their kid off at Pleasant Hill and then taking their kid to Wentworth. We're not really changing the traffic pattern, but I don't know, like, this is
some
where,
people already going from Broad Turn to Blue Point, so. Yeah,
That's true.
all sorts of examples, I guess.
but now there would be going from Broad Turn to Payne, and so again, I don't know.
And it's only certain times of the day too. Remember that with schools, it's pretty limited. You know, it's not like they go back and forth 4 times a day, or shift changes, or any of that, like that.
It's pretty controlled, and again, I think that's the nice part. The
No,
nice-
we're not even talking about.
Good one.
Yeah, I don't.
yeah, the nice part about the school is, like, they can dictate that to some extent and dictate where the buses are coming from and.
Right.
and so there's a lot more control that they have over. At least the bus traffic. They can't control what parents do when parents are driving their kids, but I think. You know, I don't know if this will prompt more parents to allow their kids to take buses, or what that behavior will be, but I know. I don't know if that was a more recent phenomenon with COVID that just surged.
Yeah, it definitely. COVID.
I don't think it's
Go
gone
out.
back either.
No, but you're also gonna have an increased capacity at a new school for before care,
Mhm,
so that's.
Oh, that's true too.
Yeah.
That's true.
mhm.
Of course, hopefully you're gonna have more kids able to walk, which is a novel concept in this
Mhm.
town. You know, with the creation of sidewalks and, you know, safe passing and the old fashioned crossing guards and
Yeah.
stuff like that. It's crazy when I see
Mhm.
people being bused, kids being bused, who live across the street from this municipal where the schools are.
Yeah,
But you'll have a lot of parents who don't want their kindergarten, their 5-year-old getting on a bus, with a 40-minute bus ride,
mhm.
so.
But I don't know if that's something that the school can kind of, I don't know how much flexibility this gives the school to address that. But I think the other concern for some parents, because I know today, I think for people who are. My bus is, because I'm close to the campus. Is K-5 on that bus, and I know some buses are just K-2, some are 3-5. But the problem there is, like, I have one friend who lives in West Scarborough. And they have 2 completely separate different bus times that are like 20 minutes apart
Yeah,
for their kids to get on the bus and to pick up their kids. And one's in 8 Corners and one goes to Wentworth, and it's just like,
That's what our neighborhood is like too. with Blue Point.
Yeah. and so. That's a problem that this will hopefully help
Yeah.
address to some extent too.
I'm gonna ask a question. I hope I'm not opening a can of worms.
You do that? No.
No, I wouldn't do that. Are they considering doing some sort of a road that would connect the schools with the campus? I.e. a cut through the banks, because I know there's wetlands. and
Yeah,
this and
that's
that.
come up in conversation.
You mean out back behind the middle school?
But wherever, you know,
Well-
so that there's a connection between the campus
Yeah.
to this, if this comes up to fruition.
I think there's been discussion more for like fire safety, but not for like movement of,
Cause to me,
People.
that would make sense for movement of people, to keep them off all the side roads when they're
Yeah.
dropping their kid off at the school, and then they gotta go drop their kid off
Well,
at
that's-
another school
yeah.
or whatever.
and that's something that's been discussed of like, okay, so you have a parent who goes and drops their first kid off at this school.
Right.
How do they take their next kid to
Wentworth.
Whitworth,
Right,
to the middle school, or vice versa?
without going all the way around Robinson's barn and
Yeah.
and it may be part of a TMP type of
That could be something.
discussion. I
That
don't
would be
know.
lovely, because right now the schools are just that incredibly accommodating, letting parents drop one and pick up.
Oh, I know.
Yeah. But I think that's the area by the middle school is just not. What we've heard more and more from
Yeah. the
state and
well,
federal is that when the middle school was built there, we used all of our chips for that particular
Yes.
site because it's all wetlands. And so
Right.
likely we wouldn't get the permitting from environmental agencies to be able to build any sort of road in that area.
But that was then, this is now.
I think it's gotten more strict too.
I know,
feel
but
like.
I'm just saying, there's always a way.
But I would say if we're gonna ask, now's the time to ask while we have the need and justify it.
Yeah,
It'd be
or
harder.
yeah, anyway, it's just something that I would personally like to see.
Yeah.
Them consider, because it would help with the traffic outside of,
Mhm.
this commuter traffic.
Mhm.
That happens, I mean, it's a reality, God.
Yeah.
You know. You
Or-
see them backed up,
Yeah,
when I go down Gorham Road in the morning and they drop the kids off and trying to get out into.
Yeah.
So anything.
or we
can do-
encourage people to take the buses, like we're investing in buses and
I know.
all this equipment, so the other option is. Use the buses. And
Also at the
Yeah.
middle school, even if you can't make any cut through back there, when the portables come down, the roads will get reworked, right?
Yep.
So that should.
Oh,
help
that's
for-
true, that's
right, I
true
mean-
too.
yeah, that is part of the reconstruction that they're looking at the
Yeah.
middle school. So for the middle school, there is still construction that's planned. That would be to remove the portables, redo the roadways.
Yeah,
They're considering. Looking to see if there is a fire lane that could be built, but it wouldn't necessarily come from Sawyer, it would come from a different location.
yeah,
But that's still being
Yeah.
explored. And then, they're gonna renovate some of the STEM and science classrooms to make them really accommodate the programming, because they were sharing an anecdote of how, something to do with the gas and
Yeah.
the way it's situated.
We should talk about.
Yeah, so that was like something that was shared at the last meeting.
Well, if the library ever does expand, right, they share that road.
Yeah. But that's the other part of, as we think about capital, is it in a library expansion or is there a satellite library at one of the
Right.
current sites? where,
exactly, right.
maybe we don't. I know they really do need, what they need there more than anything is staff space. Cause if you
Right.
go into the staff, they like
Yeah.
are literally on top of each other. And so they definitely need some expansion. But again, the other option could be, how do we factor in satellite locations at some of these primary?
Yeah, they need
Sites.
storage, there's some great
Yeah.
storage bathrooms at the.
Yeah, at the primary school.
Yeah.
They're storing books today, you can put more books in there.
I know.
I think it's a town that said no to the library twice, why don't we stop talking about the library?
Because it's,
Yeah,
things change, life changes.
Yeah, but it wasn't that long ago that the town overwhelmingly said no,
To that particular plan,
correct.
so
Which
maybe
they-
they.
Which the library promoted as the only option.
Well, things change, life changes.
Nancy will be gone. I mean. it'll be
new
a
library director.
Yeah, things are gonna change.
Mhm. I think the challenge with that, because I sat on the board of trustees, was like, a lot of the people who worked on that project were very much invested in the library because they value the library. A lot of the board of directors, they're some of the most wonderful, most well-read people. But they see the library as something that I just don't think the public
Right.
fully connected with. Because they really, and I see it from their view, felt like it really was a center for the community. It's where people go for information. It's where they come to learn. It's where they come to engage with each other. So for them, the ask was the right ask. Unfortunately, for the rest of the public,
That they didn't agree with.
yeah, didn't agree with it. And I think that's okay. Because they felt like they were going out asking for what was appropriate for what they thought was gonna serve the community, but
That's why you put things out to vote.
Yeah, but it doesn't have to come up every year.
No, and I think part of what this school will do, like, and again, as a council, we haven't like fully looked at some of the capital. I think to Sue's point about that 10.6%, I know in the model, John has some assumptions. I think that's where the council and future councils will have to continuously look at the capital plans to say, when is the right time for this? Because to me, nothing is gonna happen. If I'm still on the council, I don't even want to talk about a community center or a library expansion until we figure out the school
Exactly.
situation. So we can do the work, we can kind of scope it, we can kind of engage the community, that takes time. But like, as far as I'm concerned, if the school doesn't have a solution that the voters have approved, everything else kind of stops, because this is the most important need for the community right now, that we have to understand the implications of it, given that regardless of what the solution is, still, it's going to be a big number. So whether it's the current solution that passes, or if it fails and a separate solution comes, it's still going to be pretty expensive. And because it's going to be another year later, we're going to pay a premium on that cost as well. That's likely going to be things that we could avoid. So again, that's my personal perspective.
No.
But will it be the same solution that, will they come forward with the same solution all over again? If this goes down in November, will they come back in June with the very same proposal? Just
I don't
to
know.
just cost more? Because I would hope that the message would be, there was something wrong with the solution that they were proposing.
Well, I would
And-
hope that people who are on the no side, if the no wins, offer solutions.
But I do think
Or
it
at
would be,
least reasons that
Yeah,
it was a no.
Right.
and if they
Yeah.
don't have the solution.
well, and I think that's the hard part, is like, I'm very thankful for everybody coming here tonight. Especially seeing some of the new faces that we haven't had in these forums, but I love seeing the old faces too.
Not offended.
Yeah, but you know,
Was that an age joke?
no, I mean, I shouldn't say old faces, I should say our recurring guests,
a recurring guest.
a recurring guest. Because again, you know, that's been the biggest challenge, is we have these forums, we're trying to hear from people. Even voting today, like, really record low, probably voter
It's
turnout.
ridiculous.
So the apathy right now, like, if we got more feedback, which we've tried and we've asked, and the information's out there, it's public, people will provide feedback along the way, but how do we have these conversations more with people so that we can really hear? It's not, our forums are open to the public. We're meeting every 2 weeks on Tuesdays at 6:30 for the rest of the summer, to just kind of make sure everything is ready for the future. But right now it just feels like people are busy and they just are focused on other things. And so how do we know before we have to put it to the polls so that we can be smart about it?
Yeah, I agree. I think I thought the school board was gonna pack this thing like a bomb. And, yeah, I thought they were gonna send people here all over the place. Just seems like the kind of thing that they would want people to go to, you know? I know you're not on the school board anymore.
Yeah.
I predict this was gonna be busy. It's not very busy.
You mean like the showing and,
Council Corner Live, yeah.
yeah,
I thought this was going to be.
well, they did do a community forum last week, but again, it wasn't, I would say this has maybe more people than the last forum.
Right, really.
Mhm.
Excuse me, John, what meeting did you say was ever gonna every Tuesdays? Or-
The
Building.
building committee
Oh.
meeting is meeting every other Tuesday now.
I think more meetings in this format would be useful for the building committee to do, because I think Sue said it earlier, I'm sort of hear the same presentation over and over, and it gets a little like
Yeah.
tedious after a while. This is more like, oh, that's something
I love your suggestion about maybe having a forum at each community school, no agenda, and the topic is, if this passes, what should we do with this space?
Right.
And again, I don't know if that's something that the building committee needs to drive, or maybe that's something the council can do.
School board needs,
They should be involved,
To
but what happens with those spaces is the town and the council
Well, true.
responsibility. So that's where I feel like it should definitely be a partnership, but I love the idea of going to those forums and saying,
Well,
I
even,
think that's
even,
part of passing it though, so I do. think
Right.
The,
right,
I think the success in November depends on people feeling comfortable with.
yeah, and that's why I was saying the school board, because, yeah, they need to have neighborhood meetings, so to speak.
Yeah, and I know the tribe.
Well, I know they are actively going to different
Group.
groups, like they went, Shannon went, the school board chair went to Sedco a couple weeks ago and spoke to that group, so I think they are trying to figure out where can they go to have conversations, but the challenge is getting people to show up in the places that we've had, because it's not for a matter of trying, they've had many forums, it's just
I think
people,
some of the people most impacted are people like you, whose kids just
Right.
aren't in school yet. So it's finding those people.
yeah,
Yeah, and some people don't even know that they're gonna be like having a 1-year-old in 2028 or something.
Are you talking about yourself, Noah?
I.
You need to start your family. Yeah.
Yeah, when it was Wentworth, it was like you had parents feeling the impact of
Right.
the deficits of that building.
Yeah.
Now it's like.
Well, there are some kids, like my daughter's going into 3rd grade, so she's gonna miss, by the time this project is done, I think she will benefit from being in just the 7th, 8th grade only, but she's still gonna be, I think she's gonna be the last class in the portables in 6th grade. So that's where I'm like, there are some people some parents who will feel that, but again, it's not just about the parents and the people who will be sending their people to school, but like people who are seniors and concerned about taxes, like we need to hear from them, and
Yeah.
maybe a
Absolutely.
forum specifically dedicated to like financials or something, like understanding the
Once
financial
the
impact.
senior tax freeze goes away,
Or we figure out what the heck they're doing.
yeah, that it would be something where you could come and talk about what will
Right.
happen to your taxes next year.
Yeah,
And
I think that would be a good one.
Well, and we need the numbers too. That
Yeah.
frustrates me, because as far as I'm concerned, as you know, again, for the 80 millionth time, all the details, tell me what the bottom line is.
Yeah.
The bottom line is, how's it gonna affect my taxes?
Mhm.
And that's what you're gonna hear from people.
Well, I think that's where we need to go out and have a lot of conversations when that is known,
Yeah,
and hear from people
Yeah.
about their concerns and the impact, and
right.
think as a council and future councils, what can you do? Because to me, this is all about good capital planning.
Yes.
And unfortunately, the one thing I will say about Scarborough, and you might disagree with me, so it's okay to disagree with me, is that I personally feel like as a town, we have been very conservative in what we've been investing in. And I think, that is now coming back to haunt us with this school and other needs in the community. That again, because we are pretty conservative, that's come at a cost of avoiding things that are now before us. And so I would like to see us find that right balance between how do we invest responsibly that considers the people in town who genuinely are going to have a hard time with any increase, whether it's
Right.
A 1% mill rate or nothing, because that is a reality within our community that we need to account for. But there are things that we need to be making those tough choices and investing in. And I am a fan of like also digging deep in the budget and finding where can we trim that. I know when we budget at work, I know who the smart people are that are really good. And I'm not saying the town does this, but again, there's always room for process improvement, cost savings, things to do things better and differently that could save some money. I don't think we're gonna find like big places to cut. That's gonna be like sizable, but if we can, demonstrate to the public that we're managing our operating budgets responsibly and we're planning capital responsibly. And part of that is also growing responsibly to make sure that one, we can help pay, but also that we're not growing so fast that we're having to spend more money to keep up with that growth. So I feel like it's a very complicated situation that I've really learned to appreciate being on the council, because you don't, until you're in it like this, it's like one decision over here triggers something over here, which
Right.
triggers something over here. And I always tell myself, like, I've had to learn this, like, I'm a people pleaser, I like everybody to like me. This has been the hardest thing to learn, to be like, it's okay to not be liked, because there's no thing you can do where everybody's gonna be happy.
That's
And
right.
it's really hard and it sucks sometimes.
It isn't a like, it's not like, John, it's just
Yeah.
different. people
Values.
have
That's
different
right.
Yeah.
views.
I think
Well,
a
and I
little
think-
bit of
yeah.
what you were saying too goes to your original point too, of like, when was this decided? Like, how did we land on the solution? I think a lot of people on the board felt that same thing, like, this has just been being like ignored. We can't keep like rehashing it, so you sort of pick up where the last board left off and just try to keep moving it forward, because the town, I don't think, has done a great job investing in
Mhm.
capital projects, and it just kind of had to. You know, you could sit, I mean, I could have sat there for years thinking, what? about this?
Well, I mean, I see exactly how it happened, because the decision, they were deliberating. And then we had Julie, and all the focus was on Julie Kuchenberger and ousting a bunch of school board members, and no one's looking at the school project. And then we had the interim superintendent, who was kind of a short termer, it wasn't, and we had COVID. And then finally, we're back to business, and
Yeah.
we just,
And we
Well,
also
it
chose
was
this
waiting
building.
On state funding.
Yeah.
So we applied for the state funding, and that took.
Yeah.
Over a year, I think, to
Right.
get that answer, and there's a lot of stops and starts,
But we also invested in this, that I think,
this building. Yeah.
and I think there was general agreement between the school and the town, my understanding at the time, that let's do this first and then
Right.
let's do the school.
Yeah.
Frankly, I don't know what led to that, but again, I don't know if it was good to like wait, like the work should have been moving in earnest in
Yes.
parallel to like know what it is. And yeah, but I think that's been the issue mostly, is, as you mentioned, this work really did start in 2014. And there's been so many starts and stops, and
Well, as Sue said, you had
Yeah.
the recall, you had all sorts of foolish things that went on, and everything just went
yeah,
but
to hell in a handbasket.
at
and then
this point,
COVID.
when the referendum, I mean, I think that the school, they're up against, the cost. There's gonna be a group of people who will vote against it,
Mhm.
almost no matter what.
Right,
But then I mean, seriously, it'll be the biggest project we've done to date is 38 million, and now we're looking at 150 plus. And then there'll be a group of people who will vote against it because the neighborhood schools, they like even people who do not have kids in school, and they still live in their old neighborhood and they like that school.
Mhm.
And then you're gonna have a lot of anti-Downs people who don't like the Downs.
oh,
And
stop.
The school, it's gonna be built.
Yeah. No, I mean, I
So-
think, yeah, you're putting out all of the headwinds that this project has before it, that creates risk upon risk upon risk, but those are all important and valid. But I also hope people also take a step back and say, but this is for a huge investment for our community. It's, we have a problem. This is a solution. No matter what the solution was, I think there would have been problems wherever it was located or whatever came forward. And so, to Kristen's point, I think at some point we just have to have, like, to me, the best way to get, feedback is put it out to the voters and let them decide. That's the only way we're gonna know for certain is this the right thing for Scarborough? And I think while there are some things that people won't like, I also hope that they will look at the value and the benefit that this will have in those different places. The cost, like we've talked about, you have to kind of move away from short-term costs to long-term costs. For me, I'm planning to be here for hopefully 50 years. And so that matters to me. You also have to look at the location, like the proximity to the campus just brings a lot of value. There will be a lot of things in the Downs, whether you like them or not, that will bring a lot of value to our community, and to the people in that neighborhood who live there and their kids that will be coming. So I mean, there's value there. So I think
If it happens.
if it happens, but I think there are all these things that, I just hope people can take a step back to Jean Marie's point and say, yes, don't like certain things. There are certain things I don't like about this, but I've come to accept that despite those things, it's still a really good solution.
If not now, when?
Yeah. Or what, and I don't, yeah,
Mhm.
That to me is more of an urgent thing than.
No, and I'm with you, I'm against,
Yeah, well, I mean, I think it's not necessarily. The people, I think the developers have pissed a lot of people off even before we moved in. And I think the credit enhancement agreement's not helping anybody that is going to have tax arguments. But I have a satire.
Yeah.
My
Sorry.
idea is. Take over Walmart. There was recently some lady trying to rob Walmart that I heard about, so just take that by eminent domain, get rid of Walmart, and then that's 26 acres.
that's creative thinking. I don't think, yeah, I don't.
Any other alternative solution?
Yeah, that would cost in the eminent domain, you have to pay the fair market price. On the
That's
eminent
worth it.
domain, you can't just take
They
it.
should pay us to take it off their hands.
No. But again, just honestly, thank you all for coming tonight. And
Yes.
Again, if you have other questions or if there's other things you want to talk about, we're always open. Again, the building committee meets every 2 weeks. Their next meeting, I think it's not next week. Because
So
of
on
the
your
board.
calendar?
I don't have it. So,
next Tuesday. 4th of July.
yeah, so it's the one after that, likely the 7th, the 11th. And so that's the next meeting. Again, there's a school board workshop with the town scheduled on the 13th. And then, depending on where we are with the land deal and the appraisals, there could be something on the council agenda on the 19th. It's more likely by August 2nd, we'll probably have to have a separate meeting, to talk about the land deal and finalize it.
Please, don't do it all in one night.
Yeah, well, what we're hoping is if we can do something on the 13th to again, start to get information out. That's your point was heard of like. Making sure that we're giving the public enough time and information to digest. The challenge is just the calendars and typically the council only meets, as you know, once in July and August, so people already have trips
And I'm
planned.
away on both dates.
So trying to figure out, we might have to be,
Yeah.
hybrid or something to accommodate people. But this is big, and so it's important that we make the time to work through it.
What
and
did
bring
you
a couple
work
on.
on the 13th of the board?
It's at the board's meeting, so it's on a Thursday.
And what is that?
So
ordinance?
it's getting the latest update on the school. I don't know if we'll be ready to talk about traffic and all of that stuff to share that more publicly. That could be part of it, is sharing the offsite work. We've talked about looking at the model that we've been referencing, so the committee has a sub finance committee that the council finance committee chair has been partnering to develop. And the rest of the full council hasn't been fully briefed on it. And so it's an opportunity for us to kind of dig in, like Sue's probably, like I haven't looked at it yet, but I know Sue's dug into it. And so I'm interested to get my fingers on it. I'm just,
I found 2 mistakes,
yeah,
so that's a little worrying.
well, hopefully this peer review will help to kind of look at things. Like I'm not aware of like what the mistakes are, but I do know that, Councilor Pucci is amazing, but he's human and is prone to make mistakes, and that's why we need a peer review to just make sure it's working as designed, and if we need to refresh our assumptions as well to make them more tighter, we need to look at that as well. Any last minute questions or? No? Well, thank you all again for coming.
Thank you.
We'll have another one in these in a few months, but